Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the August meeting of the Superintendent Advisory Council. I'm glad everyone could make it here in person. And for those of you that are joining us online, I would remind you that you will need to have your camera on for the duration of this meeting. Hope everyone has had a great start to the beginning of their school year. And it looks like that Aaron has put together a really nice agenda for us today. And with further ado, I'll ask Commissioner Fletcher if he has anything he would like to add.
Just a couple quick comments. We're moving along in the process for the college admissions. The scoring is continuing. Hopefully, they'll be moving into talking contract negotiations, things that in the next few weeks. Again, it is our hopes to have that college admissions exam selected by October or by mid-October, somewhere in that neighborhood. If we could get it sooner, it'd be better. But again, we were trying our best to work with the cabinet to get through that process as quickly as possible. Also, too, you're going to see on the agenda for today, really, we've gone through one reading of what the new accountability weights will be and also what the growth model will look like. We've gone through one reading. It's went to LSAC, it's went to SCAC, it's went to several advisory councils, and now we have a revision of what the growth model will look like. It is categorical growth, and you're going to see that today. I think so, Jennifer. I think that's on the agenda. And also the accountability weights. Without stealing too much thunder, we've taken a lot of recommendations from the LSAC, the local Superintendent Advisory Council, SCAC, and others, and I think there's will be a lot of things in there that you'll appreciate. As a matter of fact, as a former high school principal, I really like the fact that right now the proposal is an increase in the weight for college ready, or I'm sorry, our transition readiness component. So there is an increase in the weight for that. And then how does chronic absenteeism fall into place? Don't want to steal too much of it, but very excited to hear your input and your thoughts on where we are with the accountability weights and also with the growth model itself. Congratulations to everybody. I think everybody should be started by this point. I hope everybody's had smooth starts. I'm looking around the table. I've seen a few people have had to call off school, maybe at least once and a few times with power and heat and a lot of different things. I hated those days. I remember having to get up and, having to do a drive at 4 a.m. drive in the middle of summer was ridiculous. You don't get into that flow until wintertime, but again, there's been a lot of weather issues and things of that nature too. So, but again, seems to be on smooth sailing right now so far. Knock on wood. A lot of different things going on across the state. Excited. I'm a big high school football fan, so I try to get out and on Friday nights and watch some football too. So hopefully see you at some not only there, but also in some classrooms and things of that nature. I think I may have some visits scheduled. I am going to the Jackson Purchase area in October. Looking forward to that. And also, too, I will say, I also enjoyed this summer doing the summer reading program. I got into a lot of districts, had the opportunity to read to a lot of students. The questions that students will give the commissioner are a lot of fun. There's questions from everything to what's the salary of people at KDE to what's your favorite color. So it's a wide range, even with elementary kids, but it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy reading to the kids and just having that opportunity to be with them. So for me, I don't want to take too much time on the assessment accountability, but I think that's one of the things I'm excited for you to look for. And I'm sure there's others, but I'll be happy to answer any questions, if at all possible, that you may have to start. And I'll close with this. Several of you have students on the Superintendent Advisory Council. They did a phenomenal job representing districts yesterday. One of the pushes that their project's going to entail is they would like to have student voice on more local boards of education. So they'll frame that work this year. They worked on ILPs last year, but their work from the Student Advisory Council is going to be centered around can they get more students? I think we have 15 students out of 171, 15 districts out of 171 that has a student on their Board of Education as a non-voting member. And so their push is to try to get more awareness out, to get more student voice, and that's going to be their project for this year. So be looking more for that from our Student Advisory Council as we move forward. So I'll turn it back over to Chair Ballinger.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I turn it over to Aaron for a roll call, there has been a request before you speak today, if you could please state your name before asking a question or making a comment. With that, Aaron, I'll turn it over to you for roll call.
All right, Amanda Abel,
Present virtually.
Wayne Ackerman,
Here.
David Arvin,
Present virtually.
Carrie Ballinger,
Present.
Larry Begley,
Here.
Wes Bradley,
Present.
Charlie Brock,
Present virtually.
Tom Cochran,
Present.
Ralph Hamilton,
Present.
Damian Johnson,
Present virtually.
Vicky Jones,
Present.
Justin Kaiser,
Here.
Bob Lawson,
Present.
Matthew Matting,
Here.
Todd Neese,
Here.
Brian Robinson, Mike Rowe, Sherry Satterley, Wayne Sizemore,
Here.
Seth Southard,
Present virtually.
Mark Wade,
Present.
Sarah Wasson,
Here.
Henry Webb, Leonard Whalen,
Here.
and Brian Yearwood.
Here.
Thank you, Erin. At this time on our agenda, we do need to approve our May minutes. Those minutes have been emailed to you previously, and you also have them in front of you. I'll give you just a moment to look over those, and then I will need a motion to approve the May minutes of the SAC meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second those.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Moving on in our agenda, our first presentation that we have today is Assessment and Accountability Update. I'd like to welcome Ms. Jennifer Stafford, our Associate Commissioner, and Shara Savage, the Division Director in the Assessment and Accountability Support in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for time on your agenda today. There has been lots of activities since we were last with you in relation to the implementation of House Bill 257 and updating the regulation 703 KAR 5:270, which is Kentucky's school accountability regulation. We've had a very collaborative process in developing this regulation and the input that we've had. As you know, discussions started with the Kentucky United We Learn Council, and we've been working on a reimagined assessment system and accountability system for 4 years. There have been a number of prototypes. There's been a number of frameworks. We've been in front of you talking for a few years now, and we're in an exciting juncture in regards to developing that system. As you know, we had legislation that we were able to influence some. Legislators brought their own opinions and own directives as well into the bill, but we're happy right now to bring forward a regulation. Now, it's in development. It's still in draft form, and we're looking forward to your feedback today on where we stand with that regulation. So if you'll go to the next slide. So today what we're going to do is there's two kind of sections to our presentation. We're going to talk about first the current accountability. So the 25-26 accountability, where we just finished last school year, and we're getting ready to report on that old accountability or the current accountability system. Then we're going to take a turn and look to the future with the implementation of those amendments with 257. So two things, so two directives. So we're going to start with the current system, and then we'll move into some future discussions. So at this point, I'll turn it over, I think, to Shara for the next slide and the introduction to the current system.
Thank you, Jennifer. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as Jennifer stated, for the 26 fall data reporting from the 25-26 school year, those assessments have now funneled in, and we are getting ready to report on that data. So the current system still has current status and change. That change being the prior year, the difference between the prior year and the current year. We still have the indicators, the state assessments and reading, mathematics, science and social studies and writing. We still have the English language proficiency, the survey, and in high school, the post-secondary readiness and the graduation rate. So all those will continue to be in the accountability system and combined into an overall performance rating, that rating giving you those colors still. Next slide, please. So again, the state accountability system will still yield you those colors using the prior year minus the current year. And then we still will have, we have two, when you get your data, you'll have two sets of numbers. So you'll have the state numbers that will give you your ratings, that give you your colors, and then you'll have your set of data that gives you your federal classifications. And that's your CSI, TSI, and such. So next slide, please. So with that in mind, here as a reminder, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the color ratings, blue being your highest, red being your lowest. And so you'll receive a color for each indicator, and then those roll into an overall performance, giving you your overall color rating.
Sure. If I could add, that was one of the pushes from the Cool Council and others. You know, right now we have essentially you have two different indices. You have your index that's for your color rating, and you also have the index for your average of the last 3 years that went into the CSI identification. So with the new system moving forward, it'll be one number as we move forward. So that was another push, so there's not any confusion. This was your number, this is where you fall, things of that nature. But before, essentially every school had two indices, one for state accountability, then one for federal accountability. But moving forward in next year, in fall 2027, there'll just be one index.
Correct. Yeah, it sets it up for a very complex system that we have now. So next slide, please. So here are those indicators that I mentioned and the weights that are still in place. So those will be what is included in this current accountability system. Next slide, please.
And you may want to, that's also in your packets. When we get ready to compare the second one, it'd be good to keep that in front of you so you can compare the two to see how they're different.
Right. So then you'll have your set of data for your federal classifications. You'll still have CSI, TSI, and ATSI. ATSI is identified every 3 years, and CSI and TSI are now annually. So for a school to for them to no longer meet the criteria for the identification and demonstrate progress for the overall score, that's how they will come out of that classification that they may be in. So next slide. Next slide. So here is a look at the tentative 26 data reporting timeline right now. So the first week of August, once again, we were excited to get in the hands of each district their student data. So
there was a question at the beginning of the week that Dr. Stafford kind of scared me and alerted me. He's like, are we not going? And she said, I think we can. And then it happened. So there was a little bit of panic from the commissioner in that first week. But
No need.
Dr. Stafford took care of it and her team.
So we were able to accomplish that. And then we have just wrapped up fall QC data review that took place from the 12th through the 21st. And then now we're looking forward to our quality control day on September the 23rd. Now remember, this is tentative, so it could change. But right now we're still on track for September the 23rd. That'll be the first time that your district assessment coordinators will have a look at their accountability data. And then we'll move into the embargo period, October 13th and 14th. And then with public reporting being on October the 15th, and then moving right into that 10-day regulatory period immediately after public reporting day. So next slide, please. Okay. So same requirements, just a different House Bill number. So it's House Bill 500 now. It's your website requirements, so that is still required. So next slide, please. And then KDE is still here to provide support as needed. And your next slide, please. So before we change gears here, if we could back up just one slide, just a second there. So just pausing here before we take a shift. So I've just covered fall reporting for 2026. If there's any questions at this time, or if you have anything to add for 26.
So we were really excited the fact that all of the assessment scores from your 25-26 school year are currently in the hands of your educators. So your teachers have the scores from their Kentucky Summative Assessment, alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment, the SAT, Access, Kindergarten Screen, all of the assessment scores. So your teachers should have those scores and be able to make educational decisions on the students in their classrooms. And we're very excited the fact that for the most part, we've got those back before the start of your school year. So we literally stopped testing on June 5th and August 5th, all the student scores were in. That's huge when you think about the millions of tests that were taken.
Right.
And the scoring that has to go into that. So 2 months from the time that we stopped testing on June 4th, and we got it to June 5th to August 5th. So that was quite an accomplishment, and we were really proud of that fact.
Chair Ballinger, may I just speak to that for a second?
Absolutely.
So just want to say thank you for that. I can't imagine what an undertaking that is, but making this data actionable, just as you mentioned, getting it in the hands of the folks who are making the moves is a necessary step. But just kudos to you all and your teams for making that happen. So that makes it for a fantastic partnership. I'm sure that's feedback you've received in the past, and just thank you for that kind of effort making it happen.
Thank you. I'll share that with our team, and our vendors are partners as well. And so they responded to our request.
And one other item that in the upcoming year, we'll be going through the procurement process for the next vendor for KSA. Could be the same, could be others, but we'll go through that process. And one of the priorities is how quickly can we get the test data back? So that's one of the things that's going to be in our scoring rubric is how quickly can we get that test data back to you? Again, kudos, 2 months. That's impressive. It's impressive to get the individual student data back and back to teachers, things of that nature. But we want to make sure we get it to our teachers and to our staff members as quickly as possible. And that will be a part of the rubric for the new procurement process.
That's right. So you have to think about the fact that there's two different sets of data. There's assessment data, and which is the scores that we're talking about around, the KSA, AKSA, your college admissions exam, those test scores. That's the assessment data. The accountability data is coming later. We had, as Shara mentioned, we have a time frame that we're putting together. Now that we've got all the information, we've got all those, we work with our other partners like the Office of Career and Technical Education to receive the post-secondary readiness information, and the other office to get graduation rate data. So we work with other offices then to pull all that together to put it into the accountability data, which are the colors and the classifications.
And I just wanted to add, this is Brian Yo at JCPS. Our teachers have been singing your praises for having the data so early. I don't think they've had the data this early before, and I can tell you that it has changed in terms of their ability to mitigate or to provide interventions. So I just want to say thank you for getting the data out. Our teachers are singing you praises because of that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll share that again with the team. Okay, you want to shift now to so we're going to shift to implementation of House Bill 257 and the new accountability system.
And so these changes start with the 26-27 school year and will be part of the accountability data that comes out in 2027, fall of 2027. Next slide, please. So the first piece of House Bill 257 I wanted to share with you, and you may have heard us in other presentations talk about the locally developed indicators of quality. The Cool Council had worked and had presented this to be part of the local accountability. The legislators wanted to go with the locally developed indicators of quality instead of calling it local accountability. And so districts, you can choose to opt in to this or not. If you do choose to adopt this, first, of course, everything needs to align to the Kentucky academic standards. Student participation in vibrant learning experiences is required as well. Locally developed performance indicators are required. And then any data would need to be publicly displayed on your website as well. KDE is here to help support you with technical assistance and provide up to a one-time payment of $15,000 per district. Now, the commissioner has lots of stories of what vibrant learning looks like. I think my favorite, and I've told the story many times, is the tiny houses that students have. They start from the funding and the idea, and they see that all the way through to the sale of the tiny houses. So I think that's my favorite story I've heard so far.
As far as, and thank you so much, Shara. A couple of things just I wanted to add to that. When we talked to our legislators originally and we called it local accountability, our legislators said, we feel like that's comparison. And local accountability is not about comparison with other districts. It's about comparing yourself with where you were to where you want to be and where are you now. So the local, instead of having local accountability, they wanted us to take the accountability out and put locally developed indicators of quality. So that's the reason for the name change, which made sense. The other part is you should be finding if it hasn't, I don't think it's gone live just yet, but in order to get that $15,000, I think it's called a cost offset in legislation for local accountability, it's going to be an assurance in GMAP. So it'll be a superintendent assurance as you go through in order to get that. And once that assurance is completed, I'll talk with the Office of Continuous Improvement Support, and we should be able to get you that one-time payment out as quick as probably by the next month. So again, there should be an assurance that will go live. I'm hoping within the next few weeks. It should be no later than September. And once you've filled out that assurance saying we assure that we've checked this box, this box, this box, then you have that $15,000 cost offset. Now, keep in mind, what I would eventually like to see, and is actually in the original proposal, I'd asked legislators for a $10,000 per year plus $3 per student if you have a local accountability model, and that would be in your budget every year. I'd love to see that added back in eventually, and hopefully we'll work on that, try to get it back in. But for right now, it is a one-time cost offset of $15,000. No promise for years to come, but just know the commissioner is going to be lobbying for that as we move forward. Well, Shara, thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So another piece of the bill was these targeted quality measures that are going to be reported on the school report card. Now, they are not a part of accountability, but they'll just be measures that are on the school report card. So the first one is at the middle school level, and the percentage of students who that are in 8th grade that they complete a high school credit. And then at the high school level, grade 12 students a percentage of those who complete the FAFSA or that their parents complete an opt-out form. And then at the educator level, the percentage of teachers who have achieved their rank 2 or their national board certification. And so again, these are not a part of the accountability, but they are measures that will be on the school report card.
And again, I'll add to that. You may remember that one version of the bill actually had to be 5% of the index. We talked with different legislators. It went into free conference committee, and it came out that these had to be reported. not necessarily, and just being open, the same thing I told legislators, so much of this is adult behaviors. And we're not really measuring student outcomes here. You know, there's right now in legislation after June 30th, it becomes part of the index of June 2030. I'm sorry,
Correct.
June 2030, it would be part of the index. I'm hoping that changes. To be open with you, I'm going to still be lobbied to pull those out because, for example, at one time it was just what's the percentage of your seniors that were completing the FAFSA. Well, no other state has that as part of their accountability model, but you do have other states that have that part of a graduation requirement, but they have the opt-in. I'm sorry, the opt-out. So if a parent fills out a form and says, you know, we've had consultation with the district, we've got the information, but we still don't want to fill out the FAFSA form, then you would get a check mark for that senior still. So if it goes into accountability, that or is very important because, you know, some parents, regardless, they will not fill out the FAFSA form, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But I don't think you should be held accountable for that decision. I don't think that's fair. So right now you have to report it, and that or is important. As far as the 8th grade students, you know, how many students are getting a high school credit, whether it be Algebra 1 or maybe English 9. And some districts just don't have the capacity for that. So again, I think that's more about can a district offer it as opposed to student behavior. And of course, the first one there, if you know, rank 2 staffs or higher, national board certification, I'd feel better about that if we had a little more funding for that. But again, with that being said, that was something that they were trying to find a way of teacher quality. And this was the suggestion that came out of our legislature. So again, these have to be reported, but they're not a part of your accountability index at least till 2030, just to let you know.
And I'll add to that as well. If they go into state accountability in 2030, we're going to be back to a similar situation that we're in now
Thank
to
you.
have a state system and a federal system because adult behaviors are not part of the federal system. So, you know, possibly the 8th grade students earning high school credit could go into the federal, but the percentage of certified teachers and definitely not the percentage of graduates who complete the FAFSA would not be accepted at the federal level for federal accountability. So we'll be back to, if those are not removed by 2030, we'll be back to 2 systems.
And that's how we won the compromise, we'll say, to get to this point, was to say, look, we don't want 2 numbers.
Right.
And so that was the discussion. Of course, we weren't in free conference committee. We talked to enough legislators, went into free conference, and they listened. I'll give them plenty of credit. They listened and then came out with this compromise, if you will.
Next slide, please. Okay, so the first changes that you'll see are to the assessments. So for spring 2027, we'll still be testing grades 3 through 8, 10, and 11, but we'll be removing a couple. So editing and mechanics, on-demand writing, and the climate and safety survey are being removed from our state testing program. Next slide, please. Oh,
I'll note for you also, though, writing continues to be an important part of the content assessments. The department created guidance around a district writing program that was part of House Bill 257. But as far as writing, it is an important part of the other content areas that remain because there are constructed responses, extended responses in all of our content assessments. So writing's not going away. Just the specific assessments of on-demand writing and editing mechanics are.
thank you for that, Jennifer. So then the next piece that you will change that you'll start to see and that we're going to talk about in more depth here today is the changes to the accountability system. So chronic absenteeism will be a new indicator, individual student growth in reading and mathematics. The evaluation of change at each indicator is going away. And then writing, of course, is going to be removed from the state assessment results indicator. And then as we've talked about a couple times, one overall score that will be used for state accountability that meets the federal requirements. So that's a big win in our office.
And we do want to emphasize the chronic absenteeism was brought through the legislators. I see their point. There's over 30 states that use chronic absenteeism as part of their accountability system. Now, I think we're getting assessed twice, if you will, once through your attendance and your SEEK data. So your funding is heavily it's about attendance, but also too now to have it a part of the accountability model is another thing. I will say, and there's probably some slides about how we're going to define chronic absenteeism, which we took some information from our DPPs, which I think is a good way to look at it. And again, it's from a national model. So we'll talk more about that in a second too. But we'll talk a little bit more about the others. Just wanted to chime in about the chronic absenteeism there.
And one other thing, which is Commissioner, I mentioned it, the KSA and the AKSA, both of those contracts are sunsetting, and we will be putting those both out for bid soon. Next slide, please. So here is a lineup of the new indicators. Your state's results in reading and mathematics, in science and social studies, individual student growth in reading and mathematics, English learner progress, chronic absenteeism, and then post-secondary readiness and graduation rate at the high school level only. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. So individual student growth was the most supported indicator in response to all of our surveys working with the Kentucky United We Learn Council. Over 92% of respondents to surveys wanted to have individual student growth in our accountability model, moving away from change. So this is a big step for us. They listened and was supportive of our approach to include individual student growth. Now, as we have been talking with multiple stakeholder groups, there has been multiple models discussed on how to approach individual student growth. There's not one model that just works for a particular state. It's the values that you place within those models. And so what we did is we developed ad hoc group. It was called the Accountability Thought Partner Group, and brought them together, and they were a diverse group of stakeholders that were experienced in different types of accountability and classroom experience and district and school level experience. And we really dug into different models for individual student growth. So 2 models rose to the top with a student growth percentile and a categorical growth. And that categorical growth is more like a value table. So if you were here in 2018 and 2019, for those school years, you experienced both of those growth models. The first one was a student growth percentile, and the other one was the categorical growth. We moved away from the student growth percentiles from 18 to 19. We learned our lesson on that, and we took that into the conversation with developing this model. So the proposal in the draft regulation, if you'll go to the next slide, is to go to a categorical growth model. Now, this is only in reading and math. So it looks at student performance and where the school got the student and where the student is the following year. So this currently is a elementary and middle school level only indicator. There was discussion about having individual student growth in reading and math at high school, whereas it's technically possible to do a skip year from 8th grade reading to 10th grade reading, 8th grade math to 10th grade math. That's technically possible. But there was enough conversation and enough concern that we heard as we were talking with different stakeholder groups to not include individual student growth at the high school level, because there is different paths that you can get to your 10th grade reading. So For example, you may have a student at high school that takes all basic level classes, or you have another student that takes all AP level classes. So there was enough variety there at your high school level and concern about the approach that in the current draft of the regulation, there is not high school growth included. So this is an elementary and middle school indicator only that we're talking about. And it does replace the current change level measure. If we'll go to the next slide, this is the growth value table that we have after we discussed with the Kentucky Board of Education. There's been multiple stakeholder groups that had input on this. That accountability thought partners were the ones that had provided the basis for the numbers. And we've gone through the SCAC, School Curriculum Assessment Accountability, LSAC, the local superintendent. We've also taken this in front of our Kentucky Technical Advisory Council. We did that last week. And so this has been through multiple iterations. We'll say we've had multiple versions of this table. And if you let's look at the logic of the table first, because these are values. There's no right numbers that you can put into these cells. But what you can see is how we approach the table is that the prior year is on the performance on the prior year is on the left-hand column, and then the current year is that second row across the top. And so you can see that in this model, we have been able to subdivide each of those performance categories. So we've subdivided novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished into low and high. Now in 2019, we didn't subdivide distinguished, low, and high, but in this approach we have. So if you have a distinguished low student and they continue to maintain distinguished low, the intersection of those two columns and in that row would yield the points for the school. So in that example, the school would get 100 points. And so that's the way you approach them. Now, the logic is that the expected growth is at the 100-point level. So across that diagonal, you would expect the student to maintain their performance of where they were the prior year. So we see that as growth. So your distinguished low students in third grade maintain distinguished low at fourth grade. They've achieved those higher level standards in fourth grade and therefore have grown in that in their acquisition of knowledge and skills. So that's for that diagonal. Now, if the student moved up a half level, so let's, for example, proficient high, they were proficient high and moved to distinguished low, that is a half step of progress, and that is then credited with 110 points. If that student moved up a full level, so from proficient high to distinguished high, so that would be from proficient to distinguished, that full level, then that would yield the 125 points. Okay, so if you go back one level, then there is a slight regression, then that would yield just half the points from what you're expected. So that yellow diagonal would yield you the school the 50 points. If you go back 2 half levels, there's no credit in the system for that. So let me pause it here. I think I see a question.
Larry Bagley, Bourbon County. Just so that I understand. But the end of the year and the group would be unless it was higher than 100.
If the student grew from let's take an example.
But there will be some, there will be culmination of measures to decide if the school or if the district would the number at the end of the year for holistically, that has to be 100 or more before you've got growth point 99.
No, and you're,
You understand
basically,
what I'm
I see what you're saying, but there's not a differentiation. What happens is every single student's going to get let's stop and go back to status for a second.
Mhm.
You know, your novice students get 0 points. Again, I'm stepping away from growth. Your apprentice students get 50. Your proficient get 100, and your distinguished get 125. You take all those students, put them together, and then average it out, and then whatever their score is what the school score is. It's very similar here. So each student is going to get a score. And if you think of it as if a student maintains the same score, apprentice low to apprentice low, essentially they've gained 1 year from third grade to fourth grade to have that apprentice low for fourth grade as opposed to third grade. So that student would get the expected 100 points. So next student, they drop down to, they go from proficient high down to apprentice high, they would get 0 points. So then after you put every single student gets a score, then you average it all together. I guess one way to look at this is if everyone grew at the rate that they should, then the school should get a 100 points average, if you will. That's what, if they grew as they should. Now, I will say that originally in the very first proposal, the scores were 0, 50, 100, 125. And if you see wherever you see a 110 here, it was 100. So when it went to SCAC made the suggestion is if it went up a half level, that's an exceptional amount of growth. Can we at least get some partial credit? And also the local superintendent advisory council agreed too. So instead of just making it a consistent 50, 100, 125 and 0, like in your status, that 110 level is to give districts some credit if they went up a half level. So at the end of the day, Superintendent Begley, if you average it all out, your district could have a 99 score, which means that not maybe out of 100 students, one student didn't grow at that rate that they should, essentially. So the only way that you're going to get 0 for a student is if they actually drop 2 half levels, if you will. And that's pretty consistent. The changes are, and I hate to start quoting where these came from, but one of the things that the local superintendent advisory council brought together, you'll see that's a different logic because they felt the distinguished category is different because it's such a small, narrow number of students. If a student dropped from distinguished high to distinguished low, just because they remain distinguished, they felt like they should keep the 100 points instead of dropping down to 50. The original proposal had 50, so that has been changed. Then also too, there was some logic if you remained in the novice category, should that be different? But still yet, for the most part, until you get to that distinguished category and also the novice low, if you drop 2, you get 0. You drop 1, you get 50. You stay the same, you get 100. You go up 1, you get 110. You go up 2, you get 125. For that student, then it all averages together. Again, we want to try to make it as straightforward as possible. And, we've had several versions of this. We're like, okay, if a student is novice, should it be different than what it was if they were apprentice? If they were proficient, should it be different than, but we want this to be a growth table, not another status table. So if you were given the similar scores for proficiency that you're given for the status, then it just becomes another status table. So it's very possible for you to have students that remained in the novice high category, went from novice high to novice high, and you get 100 points for them. Because they technically grew, they gained enough content in the fourth grade from third to fourth grade to be novice high at the fourth grade level. I will say that was one of the columns that's been changed along the way, because I think at one time that was, if you fell in the novice category, it was 50. That was more of a status as opposed to growth. So you can see the pattern is consistent until you get into the distinguished categories.
Other thoughts or questions on this table? We appreciate your reaction.
Jennifer Wayne, Sizemore Jackson Independent. I do have a question. So when will we have cut scores between the difference between novice low, novice high? Will we have,
So I'm glad you asked that question because this is a reporting only. It will not be reported to the student or their parents because those are going to be more statistical reflections for accountability, those levels. So you'll receive those next year. And this will start next year for 2027. As Shara mentioned, this is the accountability system for the 26-27. So your students took the same assessments in reading and math that we're going to have. The assessments aren't changing next year. So your spring 2026 reading and math scores, that was the baseline. And for the prior year, and then then the current year will be your spring 27. So
And
yeah.
keep in mind, Superintendent Sizemore, that this is for growth only. A
Mhm.
student will never see that they were proficient high,
That's right.
correct?
Correct.
They won't, the only thing they'll see is proficient. Now, when you start looking at your growth tables, you'll know that a student went from, you'll see the cut points and those will be developed. I'm assuming we'll have to go through another standard setting type process.
That's correct. And also we know from modeling is that the performance levels are not equal. So like if you look at novice low and novice high, there's more novice high students than there are novice low students. So to accurately give every student the ability to move and to grow, then that performance level is not going to be the statistical middle of that performance level. So for example, if novice were 0 to 50, we know it's not going to be 25, the split between novice high and novice low. And so it will be more along the median for that. It's going to take a little bit of explaining to do with that with our district assessment coordinators, but we'll train on that when the time comes.
Again, median as opposed to the mean, I guess you could say.
Right.
Median, yes.
Median.
Sorry, I had to rely on a little bit of math background from back in the day.
So thank you for that question. I was glad. Any other reactions? Thoughts?
I got a quick question. Looking at the table here. So if a student was apprentice low last year and now they go to a novice low, they get 125 points for that?
No, if they're apprentice low and drop down to novice low, you get 0 points.
Okay.
Apprentice low in the green in that first column, apprentice
Yeah.
low, then go to novice low, the intersection there would be the 0.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad.
If you land in novice low, we didn't feel like, if you
Yeah, I
had the same
understand.
logic.
I had that reversed,
Yeah.
but what I was in my thinking, but I appreciate the clarification on that.
But if you look at the logic of the rest of the table, if a student was novice low to novice low, then they should get 100 points if you follow the same logic. But we feel that novice low is such a range to reward a student for remaining novice low was something that just didn't make sense.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, we can have a student score distinguished, say distinguished, high or low. If they were high one year and low the next, they're going to.
So the expected growth is 100. And so if you're at a distinguished high and you go to distinguished low, you get the expected growth at 100. Yes.
So, and we're considering 100 be the expected. In the previous one, if you look at the rest of the logic, they should have gotten 50 points. But we wanted to make sure, again, from our local superintendent council, they said, well, if you stay in that distinguished range, regardless of going from high to low, low to, well, no, the other way it's 125. But if you go to high to low, they felt like you still stayed in the distinguished range. So you should at least get the expected, which is 100. It was 50.
It was.
Because essentially the logic there was you dropped a category. So you lost that 50 points. But again, if you keep a student in the distinguished range, distinguished high, the minimum you're going to get is 100. Oh, I should say if they land in the distinguished range anywhere.
Push it one more
Push it one
time.
more time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a performance event. There we go.
West Bradley, Nelson County Schools. I guess this feels a little bit just, I don't pretend to know all the inner workings of it. It feels a little bit like it's a novice reduction and achievement structure in the sense that ultimately it rewards the achievement of the distinguished students, because the only real penalty in this from just a broad mathematical standpoint is going backwards or staying novice low. Because the distinguished high students stay distinguished high, but the novice low stay novice low. They're the only ones that are truly penalized. So it does feel like a novice reduction structure, which is obviously part of the point. Because mathematically, that jump from 100, meaning a novice high student staying novice high gets 100, a novice low staying novice low gets 0. Any school district with novice low students will be mathematically penalized. That's all. So it does feel like a novice reduction structure.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
There is a lot of novice reduction, but if you're distinguished high and you remain distinguished high, if you look at the rest of the logic, it should have been 100 points, but we felt like if you can keep a student at distinguished high, you deserve the 125, or the student deserves the 125, I should say. It's a good observation. If you look at the 0 novice low, this is more of a I would say it's more about reducing novice low.
And it could compound accountability challenges for a school, wherever that school may be, that has novice low, in the sense that it's just a novice reduction challenge. And, my only issue there would be for those schools that are, more challenged across the Commonwealth. I just say that because it could compound some of their problems mathematically in the system.
And that's the reason why, Superintendent Bradley, that the 50, 100, 110 is in the novice high. Originally it wasn't that way. It was 0 down to, in that 50, 100, 110 in the novice high landing, if you will, that column. Originally, I think that was 0, 50, and maybe 50. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But the reasoning was if we don't give those districts, if you look at it from a pure growth standard, you're really penalizing those districts that may have worked very, very diligently to move a student from novice high to novice high, because that's movement. That's a year of growth from 3rd to 4th grade. So that was the reason why it was changed on the novice high, to try to combat that. So the only counter I would give to that is this is more of a novice low reduction chart, not necessarily just novice.
And we all know and I applaud that. We all know the ethics behind that and the intention. So, I applaud the
Appreciate
effort on this work.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
It's working now. Ralph Hamilton, Morgan County. I just have one more question. What was the logic in not weighing the district high at 150 to highlight to ensure our students are getting those advanced skills challenged? I feel like that districts will be forced to really put a lot of work into interventions, and a tier 1 could struggle a little bit because they want to move those lower students. Just wanted to know the thought process on why that's not 150 and 100. If they're scoring distinguished high.
There was no, honestly, the high score that was awarded and was 125 from the beginning. No one ever brought up 150, because if you look at your distinguished students, you get 125 for those students now. So not to say that it couldn't change to 150. If you went from distinguished high to distinguished high, you could, but you're the first one to mention that. So, it's not something that we even considered or even thought about, honestly, because the range was, we were trying to keep it as similar to the status scores that people were used to. So that distinguished high to distinguished high, that's a lot of work to keep a student at that level. And I could see your point, but you're the first one to bring that up as far as the 150.
I just feel like sometimes we get into that thought of catching kids up, and the students that are already accelerated, they are lost. And I think that we need to celebrate their brilliance, if you know what I'm saying.
I see exactly. It's a good point, Superintendent Hamilton. And I think that was part of the logic behind making sure you've got a distinguished student. And if they remain distinguished regardless, well, I shouldn't say regardless, because if you remain distinguished high, you get 125. But, if a student is distinguished, it's such a narrow band. It's such a narrow score range, if you will. So those students in the district also need to be rewarded for keeping a student at 100, or I'm sorry, at the distinguished low level. It's a good point. I haven't really thought about that.
Uh,
New one.
Yeah, it is a new one. Thank you.
We have a question from one of the people online, Superintendent Abel.
Hi, thank you. I want to add to that. It looks like from the chart, if you're proficient high and you bump up to distinguished low, you only get 10 points. But if you're distinguished low and you fall down to proficient high, you lose 50. And just my work with teachers and in assessment, that bump from proficient high and distinguished low, kids teeter-totter between those two all the time. Like that just seems very natural. So that's a big difference in only gaining 10 points versus losing 50.
That's a good point. The only thing I'll counter to this is we were trying to avoid making this another status chart. So this is really focused on growth. How much did you go up or how much did you go down, as opposed to where did you land necessarily? So what is the movement is what's rewarded, not exactly, except for the distinguished category. We didn't really try to weight it heavier if you landed in a higher area than what we did in the lower areas, because if you start doing that, it becomes another status chart, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that's the opinion of everyone. That's just one of the things that when we looked at this, it's did you go up a level or did you go down a level, and then how should you be rewarded? But take out that logic when it comes to the distinguished students. I see what you're saying, though. That seems to be different, that you're only getting a 10-point increase, but really you're getting the same increase if you go up one level, regardless of where it is, unless in the distinguished category. So it was more about, did you go up? Did you go down? How much or how far back? And then rewarding for that. So I do see your point, but I think that's more about where you landed as opposed to how much did you go up, if that makes sense. From a categorical growth standpoint. It's an excellent point. But again, more about just to reemphasize, did you go up a level or did you go down a level? Or did you stay the same? And actually, Superintendent Abel, that was brought up in one of our advisory councils, that same point, by another member. So you're not alone in those thoughts. There was actually a couple, I think, in one of our, I can't remember which one it was, but there's one brought that up.
Any other final thoughts here? Because we have a couple of other topics that we want to get through.
The only thing, Larry Begley, Bourbon County, the only thing, and if I'm jumping ahead, jump onto me, I can take you. Where is the growth factor into the new accountability?
It's coming.
That's
That's a good segue.
Okay, that's a good segue. If we'll go to the next topic or the next slide. Okay, chronic absenteeism. Now, I want to reiterate the fact that in none of the prototypes or none of the frameworks that we put together was chronic absenteeism an indicator that was brought forward.
It was discussed heavily in the Cool Council, but it wasn't added into, you're right, absolutely right. It was never added into a prototype or a framework.
Right.
Until
legislators brought it to the commissioner. So I'll turn it over to Shara to talk about the inclusion in accountability.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. So next slide, please. So here on the screen is the definition that House Bill 257 has for chronic absenteeism. So it's defined as a student engagement as measured by chronic absenteeism, which shall be defined as a student missing 10% or more of yearly school time for excused or unexcused reasons throughout the school year. So as the commissioner noted, we've talked with the DPPs. We've met with several stakeholder groups, and we've received quite a bit of feedback. So to talk about, so that's the definition, but then there's two ways to calculate it. You have the state, how it's being calculated now, and then how the federal calculates chronic absenteeism. So the federal calculation is based on school days missed, whereas the state currently is measuring in by minutes of instructional time missed, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. The federal calculation, or ESSA states, should I say, that it must be measured for at least half the year, so at least 50 days. Okay, so to put all this into an example in the next slide. Let me just back up just a little bit. If you have a student that's measured by the state, if you have a student who has needs to go to the orthodontist, and so those appointments happen once a month. So they're missing a couple hours either early in the morning or late in the afternoon, and then a couple illnesses hits, flu or COVID hits, and they miss a couple of weeks due to those issues. With the state, that student is chronically absent, considered chronically absent. With the federal calculations, the DPPs and others, with that same example, if you do have a student who it needs to go to therapy or the orthodontist, and the parents they're trying, and so they're just missing that couple hours of a morning or a couple hours in the afternoon each month, that it helps with that student being or not being chronically absent. So with this,
go to the number. So
Yeah.
for example, if a student leaves an hour early, that's not counted against you.
right.
And that's a federal definition. So whereas now we do minutes for other things,
Mhm.
but for this calculation, we're going to follow the state for your accountability. So if a student has just like Shara pointed out, an orthodontist appointment, if they go through the effort of scheduling that at 3:00 each day and they're leaving maybe an hour early, that's not going to go against you in being chronic. They'd have to miss at least half the day.
Right,
before it was the appointment.
51% of the day, and that makes them into that
That came
calculation.
from our DPPs originally. Our DPPs across the state, and their group said we would like for it to be calculated this way if at all possible. So we did take their advice and include that.
Right.
And this calculation is currently in Infinite Campus.
Yes.
So your DPPs are aware that there are two different calculations for chronic absenteeism. So there are reports currently that use both the state in minutes and the federal in hours.
Mhm. So here's an example for you. So a student, say, lives in Carter County and is really chronically ill. And so the 50 days that the student spends in Carter County is considered chronically absent, but then moves to Bath County and the health improves and is in Bath County for 120 days. And again, he's doing better, so he's not missing. And so he's not chronically absent in Bath County. So with this 50-day rule example, the student would be accountable for at Carter County and Bath County, rather than having that 100-day rule, that we have now in place for all of our indicators other than the graduation rate, where it would track back solely to Bath County, that the time that they spent in Carter and Bath would track back to Bath County. So with that 50-day rule, Carter County is responsible for what happened in Carter County, and Bath County is responsible for what happened in Bath County. So that's the example that we have for you today. So I would ask if you have any feedback or thoughts on chronic absenteeism and using the federal calculation with the 50-day rule. Okay, well then I'll turn it over to, do you have anything else?
I think the next slide is about indicator weighting. And you saw earlier the weights. If you go to the next slide, these are the current weights that are in the current system that we're getting ready to report publicly. And so you can see from this table the previous board and the values that they put on each of the indicators. And you'll notice in this accountability weights that there are differences between the elementary school and the middle school, as well as the high school. If you go to the next slide, these are the current weights in the proposed draft of the regulation. So you'll notice here that the new indicators are within the table. You have your chronism, you have your state assessment results in science and social studies without the writing. You'll notice also that your elementary and middle schools, the values are the same across. In your high schools, then are include your post-secondary readiness and your graduation rate. Now, the columns that are darkened, you will notice that those by ESSA are required to have the substantially higher amount of weight. So if you go across elementary school, the darkened columns of state assessment results in reading and math, the growth, and the English learner have to be more than, or at least 51%. So you'll notice across there that those parameters have been met within those. Just another difference there is that post-secondary readiness has been increased by 5%, and your chronic absenteeism, it has replaced that climate and safety survey at the same rate. So you can notice the same for that column for chronic absenteeism. So lots of discussion, lots of feedback that we've had on this weight table. Had great discussion with the Kentucky Board of Education on the proposed weights, and would really appreciate your feedback as well.
And I'll add some comments. If you go to the previous slide, if you don't mind, Aaron, thank you. If you'll notice, the lowest percentage that was in the previous was 4%. And that was the quality climate survey. So we kind of use that as the baseline, if you will, to work from. And switch back to the next one, please. Oh, sorry, wrong way. There we go. We did the same with chronic absenteeism. That was the lowest indicator before. We felt like chronic absenteeism should be the lowest indicator now. The English language learner, you can see that. But the post-secondary readiness was a suggestion that came out of LSAC. We have such a focus on high school transformation, on making sure students have the opportunity for dual credit, for apprenticeships, for internships, all those different things that go through post-secondary readiness. The sentiment there was that should be a larger percentage. And so I agree with it. But as Jennifer pointed out, those darker columns, we'll call it the charcoal columns, they have to, going across, have to add up to 51%. That is a federal requirement. If you'll notice, they add up exactly to 51%. So we tried to move things around so they would make sense for the rest of it. And we also wanted to try to keep the elementary and middle schools the same so that we wouldn't get confused on the calculations and you could see the same ones there. We had some discussions about having different numbers, but the 40% reading and math at the high school level. And I for full transparency, in the beginning, the commissioner was on board with having growth in reading and mathematics. I really was in the high school setting. But looking at the pathways for students on how they get from 8th grade to 10th grade is so different, even in the same high school. So could we really get a good measure there? So it makes sense why to take the growth out. So I agreed. I followed the group, and they convinced me. Not that they had to convince me, but because the board votes on this, not the commissioner. But with that being said, I do agree that with this model, I think it looks a lot better. And I love the focus that we have on post-secondary readiness and increase there. The only thing that I thought could be better might have been the graduation rate, because that's really an accomplishment of students. But if you look at where do you take away from, where do you add to, if you're going to leave that in that 6% range? So again, overall, I think we're in a good spot here. But again, welcome to any comments that you may have.
Any question I have is not a criticism. It is for understanding. Larry Begley, Bourbon County. In the gray column that is required as part of the 51, the 5% for English learner progress. What happens if a school or district doesn't have enough to qualify for that? What does that do to the 51%?
So moving forward, it'll be a little bit different than what we have now. because right now we say that it is proportionally distributed among all of the other ones. So that will be remain the same at elementary and middle school. So if you don't have the English learner at elementary and middle school, it will proportionally, that 5% will proportionally go to all the others that you do have in your school. But if you look at high school though, the charcoal columns have to be 51% at least. So if you take English learner out of that charcoal column, then it has to either go to reading and math or to graduation rate.
Right.
So that 5% at high school will have to stay within those charcoal color columns.
Will it divide evenly among, have we decided on that yet?
We have not. We're going to go through our consolidated state plan to the U.S. Department of Ed.
I got an opinion.
Okay,
Sure,
great. We love opinions.
Yes.
Later.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Good observation, though.
I may have missed this. Matt Knight in Graves County. I'm actually sliding back to chronic absenteeism.
Mhm.
Has it been determined how schools will be given their score for chronic
Oh.
absenteeism?
Thank you for asking that. So with chronic absenteeism, it's going to be out of 100. So if you have chronic absenteeism of let's say 5%, then we'll subtract that from 100 and you'll have 95.
We didn't want to reward people for having higher, so it's a inverse almost.
Inverse, yes.
100 minus whatever your chronic absentee rate is.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Good point, and
Yeah.
we'd forgotten that.
Yeah. Any other comments about the weights? Because I think we have maybe one or two more slides.
I'll be brief. West Bradley, Nelson County. I think as we're thinking about the future, I know these things are not easy to shift. I'm just thinking long term. Back to the student growth chart we had. And you think about what all the work that's going on across the Commonwealth to prepare students for work and life readiness across our high schools. Those bonus points. I'm not necessarily a big fan of bonus points to incentivize certain things for, like, let's say, apprenticeship program like we were talking about earlier. At the same time, I do believe that as we look at the post-secondary readiness, that 25, continue to explore that on a more of a layered approach to incentivize the things that we know are going to be in the best interest of the system and the students in the system, whether that's dual credit, whether that's other programming that we want to advance across the Commonwealth in partnership with community and businesses. I say that because I do think our understanding of post-secondary readiness and the conversation around it can deepen. We are right now thinking scientifically about the nature of growth, right, through a chart. But our conversation around post-secondary readiness, I think we have an opportunity to advance that further. The accountability system and the measures of that 25 points would be nice for us to continue to embrace that for future models. That would be one thing I would think about. I know that there's been a ton of thought put into this model and appreciate the federal complexities and the state alignment with what you're trying to do, and only want to applaud the energy and effort you put into that work with the board. But I do want to encourage us to look at the post-secondary readiness through more of a kaleidoscopic approach in the future.
I think that's going to be very important because we're part of the High School Transformation Network through NASB, the National School Board Association. So I think that's a good thought on if we're really truly going to look at can high school be different, then how do we have an accountability model that's different too? So that's a great point, Superintendent. Thank you for that.
I'll add to the conversation around the post-secondary readiness is that if any indicator gets to a situation that it does not meaningfully differentiate schools, then it will be questioned by the U.S. Department and removed or required to be adjusted in some manner. So if we get to a point that post-secondary readiness, if all schools or the majority of schools get and the points for it, and it does not yield an annual meaningful differentiation, will be questioned on that as well.
Sherry Satterley, Frankfurt Independent. English learner progress, for example, Jennifer, if you don't have the numbers for that, will that still be distributed evenly across the other areas?
For elementary and middle schools, it'll be proportionally. For high schools, though, it has to be within those grade columns, because if you take out that 5%, then you're only left with 46 in reading and math and graduation. So that 5% at English learners would have to go to reading and math
Or graduation.
or graduation rate, or maybe equally or proportionally between those two. But that detail is not determined as of yet.
So because elementary and middle both already have 51% in reading and math growth, it will be proportional across all areas.
That's correct.
But high school, it would only be
Grade columns.
reading and math and graduation rate to
Mhm.
maintain that 51.
That's correct. Yeah. And the proportional distribution is what we do now
Mhm.
for high school and
Thank you.
elementary, middle. Yeah.
Ralph Hamilton, Morgan County. The only observation I see is I think changing 40 to 36 to align with middle and high and up in our graduation rate, which is our ultimate goal, might be something to consider.
So having it 36 and then 10 on the end.
Okay. Any other?
Other questions? Okay. All right. So if you go to the next slide, please. All right. So we'll switch gears here a little bit to English language proficiency. Next slide. With moving to growth with reading and mathematics, we're going to take some liberties here with ESSA's flexibility option 2. Just lost my thought. I'm so sorry. So English learners, under option 2 would be required to take all grade level content areas, now including math, science, and social studies. Reading, math, science, and social studies. And if they will be required to participate if they are enrolled on or on the before the first day of the district's first testing window. What that would look like, or what this will look like, because it's going in effect for the 26-27 school year. So a pause there to say House Bill 257 did not change this here. This is just taking part of the flexibility that ESSA allows for option 2. So once the student has taken all of the grade level requirement assessments for Kentucky Summative Assessment, in accountability for the first year, the student results would just be reported in the school report card. It would not be part of the accountability calculations for year 1. Then year 2, so year 1 will get that baseline, and then year 2, all scores will be reported, all the assessments will be reported in school report card, with the addition of the individual student growth for reading mathematics. Those scores would be included in accountability. So that's year 2. Then by year 3, all the scores will be fully included into the accountability calculations.
So to reiterate, year 1, they take the test, not included in accountability. Year 2, their growth only is included in accountability. Then year 3, their proficiency, what we call status now, their status and their growth, all would be part of their accountability. One of the things that several legislators talked to us about is, can there be a longer onboarding for students that are English language learners to be included fully in the accountability model? And, with our growth calculations and things that matter, this is not specifically written into law, but the growth calculation helps us in this ability to take option 2, I should say.
Right.
So year 1, take the test, not a part of accountability. Year 2, their growth is included in accountability. And then year 3, they're fully in the accountability model. Now, we're also, Jennifer, have we finalized the changes in the growth for the actual WIDA test and the cut points for that? Because that was something else being discussed, correct?
It is being discussed, and we are continuing to meet with our EL growth partners. We've got a meeting on September 3rd that will finalize the growth target value table. So we'll bring that forward in the consolidated state plan.
And I'll be fully transparent. This is the area that I'm probably the weakest in and but I'm going to say something. Please, Dr. Stafford, correct me if I'm wrong. The English language proficiency test in itself is really a growth test. How much did they grow? How much of the language did they acquire? And across the grade levels, is if you went up a certain amount, it was the same it was for high school and middle school, or close to being the same amount. Well, we all know that an elementary student will acquire a second language at a much higher rate than what they will at the high school level. So that table, if you will, needed to be changed to compensate for that. So, for example, and I'm going to use numbers that probably aren't even used here. So if you went up 2 points in the elementary versus 2 points in the high school, the 2 points in the high school is a much greater jump than what 2 points in elementary would be. So to keep that in mind. So that's something we're looking at as the actual English language learner progress test, correct?
That's correct. And the thought partners really wanted to set some targets for our students and what levels they come in their proficiency level toward acquiring the English language. So there's going to be a little bit of different approach for the English learner growth. And also what we want to make it more fair for our students, especially across their different levels, and if they achieve partial credit. So we're looking at partial credit for students if they have a goal of like 0.3 on their test, but they only make 0.2 areas of growth. Well, we think that should be rewarded and celebrated for that growth of acquiring the English language. So we're looking at partial credit toward a growth value target. So it's a bit different in the direction that we're going, but one that we think that will bring about a more fair accountability system.
So this does begin with the 26-27 school year. And so the WIDA test that we're discussing, so all EL students will continue to be required to take those English language proficiency assessments for the WIDA test. And of course, this all has to be approved through the federal government with our SOP.
I think we have one more.
One more slide.
And
okay, so we've talked a lot here with you today, and just to bring us to an end, we have been in front of the board. I believe the commissioner mentioned that earlier. We've been to the board with the first read of House Bill 257, and the changes you saw here today are included with that. And then we will continue to talk with advisory groups the remainder of this month and throughout September to continue to seek feedback. And then we will go to the board for a second read the first week of October, and then moving into a public comment period in November, December, all the while working to complete our consolidated state plan with the federal government.
And I think this is the first time that we've shared that at a glance.
Yes, the
So
House Bill
you are the first ones to get to see that. It's put together very nicely for you to be able to communicate with your board members, your community in a nice consolidated overview for House Bill 257. So hopefully that is a good resource for you.
And it's a nice one pager, so it should be very helpful to you, hopefully.
Well, we thank you so much for your input today, and we really appreciate all the good discussion that we've had.
Anyone have any questions before we move on in our agenda?
I just have one more question. The bill, I can't remember, Dr. Fletcher, it's Ralph again, that passed about changing the program for our students that count as dropouts. even though they graduate. Has there been any guidance on how that will play into here? Because, that's always something, it's hard to have that conversation with the parent, that they fulfill their requirements. How is that law gonna coexist with the federal requirement, or has that been
Talking about the
considered?
alternate diploma.
You're talking about
Yes, alternate.
state defined. So that is part of the, this regulation, that the state defined alternate diploma goes in positively, whereas the modified diploma, similar to what we have now, that's the alternative diploma, will continue to go in to the calculations for accountability. But those edits or those amendments are in the regulation.
And again, I think that we're at the limit that we can get with the federal government side on that alternate diploma. So that would increase. So if you had some students that qualified for that, that would increase your graduation rate. It's also a part of accountability. It also puts us in a tough spot with our 1% cap too. So we got to be very careful to move forward. And of course, at the end of the day, regardless, making sure we meet the needs of students. And that was the impetus behind the alternate diploma. What would be meaningful to these kids? What would be a meaningful that would help them to get a job? What would be that would help them? As we wanted something that was just a side effect is it increases the graduation rate, but more importantly, what industries will recognize this diploma and when it comes to these students being employed. So that's what we really push for. But a side effect, it will help the graduation rate.
Any other questions? Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we're going to have an overview on the reporting process from our Educational Professional Standards Board. I'd like to welcome Ms. Nora Softic, the Deputy General Counsel, Cassandra Rosa Burgos, the Program Coordinator, and Madison Snelling, Staff Attorney in the Office of Legal Services. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon. We're going to try to put a lot of very useful information that we probably could have spent 3 to 4 hours talking about into very small bite-sized chunks. So hopefully you will leave here today with some highlights. And I know we did pass out a few handouts. One is our duty to report handout that we always send out to districts. The other is a very helpful walkthrough of our Kentucky Educator Credentialing System portal, and it takes you through how to file a complaint. So I'm joined today by some of my wonderful staff, Madison Snelling, one of our wonderful, fabulous attorneys, who's going to talk a little bit about the duty to report. I know you had a few questions about reporting to law enforcement as well as to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And then we have our wonderful program coordinator, Cassandra Rosa Burgos, who is the master of all things KEX. So I oftentimes run to her desk and ask her questions because there's no one here more proficient in it than Cassandra. So hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. All right, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we'll just go real quick. What is the EPSB? I know you guys all know this, but basically it's the board that has the authority to set the standards for educator credentials and also has the authority to take action on certificates for breaches of 161-120 and the Code of Ethics for certified personnel. And you can see statute's very prescriptive. It says exactly who needs to sit on the board, their roles, and what that looks like. Next slide, please. One of the questions you could ask, of course, is where's this disciplinary authority derived? Well, the board, just to start out, is the education profession is one of those noble professions, right? It's educators governing educators. So it's always important for people to know is that educators are the ones who are looking at these cases and opining on the different tracks to put them on. But our disciplinary authority, again, derives from statute, right? 161-120, as well as regulation 16 KAR 1020. Oh, sorry. No problem. 1020. Something important to note here is that the statute is very specific, right? So I keep talking about the statute being prescriptive. Oftentimes people say, well, why do you do it this way or that way? statute says we have to. So, and we'll talk a little bit later about the substantial changes to the complaint processing timelines that happened as a result of legislation that went into effect in July of 2024. But statute is very prescriptive. And one thing that the statute prescribes is that we are wholly independent from you all's process, right? From the district disciplinary process, from the tribunal process under 790. We have a different analysis and we have different things at times that we are proving. Next slide, please. Okay. So you also may ask, well, what is the purpose of the board and pursuing action on a certificate? And it's this dual purpose. It's a balancing act, right? And this is in reg, right? On the one side, you have this restorative approach, right? Making sure that educators have an understanding of their professional duties and responsibilities. On the other side, you have this protective approach, right? The board has to ensure that certain individuals that pose a danger to students, to school staff, to school officials, to the school community are not having that access to the classroom. All right. So just a little bit, I think we're on slide, oh, next slide, please. About how the complaint process starts. I know that's the meat of your question is what is this complaint process? Walk us through it. Okay, this is where it starts. The great majority of our cases come in through complaints from you all under 161, 123A, right? That's mandated, right? And Madison's going to kind of talk a little bit about that. But that's where the vast majority of our cases arise. We also have the ability to take complaints from parents, concerned citizens, other state agencies. We've had reports coming in from the Attorney General's Office, Special Victims Unit. We've had reports coming in from the Office of Education Accountability. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services, they often send us that they have substantiated child abuse or neglect. We get that letter that is also sent to the superintendent. And we'll talk about this later, but just because another agency has reported to us, that does not absolve the districts of their duty to report, right? That duty is still there and a report still must be made because oftentimes these outside agencies and groups do not have the full facts and circumstances that the district possesses, right? They may send us a report, but perhaps you all have the video or you all have the audio evidence. They do not. And so we still do need that district report. Okay, the next one's supposed to be the flow chart. Okay, so this one I'm going to spend some time on. So the legislation went into effect July 2024, right? And it's a lot, right? So this is sort of that new legislation in flowchart form. Our team had to kind of formulate this so that we could visually represent to everyone how the complaint travels through our process. And again, I know that was your big question, so you can hopefully take this and it'll maybe clear up the statute a little bit, but this is derived from 161, 120, subsection 2. And it starts at the top with a completed complaint. You as a superintendent, if you certify in the CEX system that you're submitting a completed complaint, that starts the timeline. And that starts our 30-day timeline. Within 30 days, we must review the complaint to determine if there's sufficient credible evidence that a violation of the Code of Ethics or 161, 120 may have occurred. Within 30 days. The penalty for not doing that within 30 days is the case is dismissed with prejudice. So we take this extremely seriously in, of course, complying with these deadlines because the consequence is so severe. And we are happy to report that no case has been dismissed for failure to meet timelines in the 2 years that we have been implementing this process. And that is accolades to this incredible staff that I get to work with. Okay, so within 30 days. We make the determination that sufficient credible evidence exists. Okay, you'll see that on that track where it says sufficient evidence, that then the case is going to continue. Okay, within 7 days, the educator will receive notice that sufficient evidence has been found and the case is continuing. At that point, they are going to have the opportunity to submit a rebuttal to us within 30 days. They can write their story. They can also submit supporting documents. So if they have any documentary evidence, they are able to upload that into our CEX portal for consideration. They are able to ask for an additional 30 days. Again, this is all prescribed in the statute. We didn't make these rules. So they are able to ask for another 30 days to submit their rebuttal. And that's it. 60 days is the absolute max. Then after the rebuttal period, you'll see that there is a second complaint review. And so that second complaint review, again, must occur within 10 days of the end of the rebuttal period. No extensions possible. Again, the outcome for not complying with timelines is dismissal with prejudice of the case. At second review, again, there's going to be that determination. Is there sufficient credible evidence to proceed with this case that a violation may have occurred? At that point, that second review is going to be taking into consideration any documentary evidence, any statements submitted by the educator and or their attorney, because of course they are able to have representation, right? Educators have their full due process rights in this proceeding, as in all other administrative proceedings here in the state. At that point, if it is sufficient, it's going to continue. Well, actually, at this point, they're all going to the board, right? So if it makes it to second review, they're all going to be reviewed by the full board. It's just one's going to go back on a recommendation of dismissal, one's going back with one of these other recommendations, right? Because at second review, if complaint review committee says, yeah, there's not sufficient credible evidence here that a violation may have occurred, it does go back to the board on a recommendation of a dismissal. And of course, this going back to the board has to happen within 30 days of the end of the potential resolution conference period, okay? Because also in there is this PRC period, right? Where I have the opportunity, I kind of skipped over that. Right here under sufficient evidence, you'll see that our staff has the opportunity to speak with educators and or their attorneys at a resolution conference. And this conference is also the result of the legislation that went into effect in 2024. And it gives us the opportunity to exchange information for educators to ask questions, for us to ask questions, and to see if potentially we can come to some sort of resolution that our staff can propose to the board as a solution, as a resolution of the case, right? So the intent there is to kind of fast track some cases where there really isn't any substantial questions of fact or law, right? So when it goes to the board, our board does meet every 3 weeks. Our board used to meet every 8 weeks, but now to comply with these timelines, the board does meet every 8 weeks to consider these cases. So at those meetings, they are going to vote on one of those tracks to send the case to. So that right there is kind of an overview. I know your big question was, what does this complaint process look like, right? There it kind of is in visual form. Again, the statute that I'm referring to is 161-120 subsection 2. All right, next slide, please. Okay, we already kind of talked about that. Next slide, please. Okay. Once it goes to further investigation or it's referred to a hearing, at that point, I always just like to say that, it's not just the EPSB, it's not just us that dictate the timelines. At that point, if it does go to a full administrative due process hearing, the timelines are going to be dictated by the hearing officer, either at the Attorney General's office or one of our in-house hearing officers. So at that point, the timelines are no longer in the control of us. So I will hand it off to Madison.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a bit about your duty to report. That's when to report, what to report, and to whom to make that report. If you could go to the next slide, please. So y'all's duty to report is found in 161-120 subsection 3, and it lays out the very specific instances in which you as a superintendent are required to file a complaint with the EPSB. In no point in 161-120 does it contemplate a waiver of any of these duties. So at some point, we'll talk to you a little bit about a designee for filing these complaints. If you do have a designee, just know that that does not waive any of the duties that are prescribed under 161-120 subsection 3. So subsection 3 states that superintendents must report to the EPSB any employee who is certified whose contract is terminated or non-renewed for cause, who resigns from or otherwise leaves a position under threat of contract termination or non-renewal for cause. So those people that resign mid-investigation, but their ultimate resolution to the case isn't that termination or non-renewal as found in subsection 1. Anyone who is convicted in a criminal prosecution, or in this fourth section is where we get the vast majority of our complaints, right? It's Anyone who otherwise may have engaged in any actions or conduct while employed in the school district that might reasonably be expected to warrant consideration for action against the certificate. So if we break that down, that is a super low bar, right? It's anyone who might have engaged in actions that could possibly be expected to warrant potential consideration for action. So if we're thinking maybe in the criminal context, right? If you learn that someone has been arrested, but it doesn't reach that conviction in the criminal prosecution that we see in the third bullet, that those actions would fall under this fourth section, this kind of catch-all. If you ever have any specific instance where you're wondering if a case falls into this broad fourth provision, you can always check with your board attorney. But just know that this is the language that the legislature chose to draft was very, very broad here. You go to the next slide. And when do you have to make this report? It's either 30 calendar days of the event giving rise to the duty to report. So when did the actions actually occur? Or if you are filing based on the criminal conviction, it's 30 days after learning of said criminal conviction. So if you have an employee who had been previously convicted of something and they did not disclose it to you, but you somehow learn about it sometime on, that duty to report is triggered 30 days after you learned of that criminal conviction, but you see everything else is based on 30 days of the events giving rise to the duty to report. As Nora mentioned previously, our jurisdiction is separate from any district discipline. So whether or not the district decides to issue discipline in any case, if it's something where it falls under the duty to report under 161, 123, you still will have to file that complaint. And again, it exists even if someone else has reported it to us, like the media. We don't always get reports from the media or might not see that something's in the news. So don't think, oh, it's all over the news, they must know about it. We really still do need that report from y'all, especially since you're typically the one that has the information that we will need. If you can please go to the next slide. So what do you put in the report? In 161, 120, it requires that you put the full facts and circumstances of the conduct as you know it, right? We don't just need a general summary to open the case. We really need to know all that information at the outset when you file your complaint. It will also save you from getting emails from myself or some other staff saying, hey, we saw that you mentioned a video. We really do need that. So you don't have to be pestered by me or one of my colleagues. So when you are filing that complaint, you can attach you should attach all of the relevant documents and records in your possession. So did you do an investigation in the district? Do you have notes of interviews with witnesses? Do you have a C&I report? All those things are relevant and would need to be included. The commissioner also by statute has access to the papers, books, and records of any education personnel in the state. And through that power, as agents of the commissioner, we also have access to all of those personnel records. So often we'll get asked, is it okay for us to send this to you? Yes, by statute, the commissioner has access to it. That's something that we also can inform your board attorney in case they're a little bit worried about releasing anything. Okay, next slide, please. So that was your duty to report to us, the EPSB, but we also heard that y'all had some questions about what other duties to report you might have. First, just as a citizen of the state of Kentucky, all of us have a duty to report any case where we have reasonable cause to believe that a child is dependent, neglected, or abused. And if you have that knowledge, you are required to report to either local law enforcement, KSP, the cabinet, the CHFS, or the Commonwealth or county attorney. You don't have to file complaints with all of those agencies, but you are required to file a report with one of them. Specifically, you'll see that KRS 620-0302 lays out more specific provisions for schools and school districts. So you are required to file a report of any suspected child abuse or neglect, regardless of whether or not the person who is perpetrating that child abuse or neglect is a guardian, a person of special trust, things that you would typically think of as the cabinet having jurisdiction over. If you are aware of anyone potentially abusing or neglecting a child, as school personnel, you are required to make that report. If someone in your district that is not you is the one that's making that report, they are also required to inform you that that report has been made, so that you know that you as a district have reported this to the appropriate authorities. And again, those appropriate authorities would be local law enforcement, KSP, the cabinet, or the Commonwealth or county attorney. And any investigation that you do into those allegations is not a substitute for one of the investigations by those local law enforcement agencies or CHFS. They have to be notified even if you do your own independent investigation. As a school district, you will also potentially have the additional duty to supplement your original report with information that those agencies might need. The 620-0302, it does not require more than one report, more than one report from the district, which is why it's important that your personnel alerts you as the head of the school district that a report has been made, so that you are covered.
Excuse me, just one question. It's Tom Cochran, Johnson County. Just that or is very important there. That's one of the four we
Yes.
reported, not all four, correct?
No, you do not have to file with all four. It's just one of, and I think this statute really contemplates that each county is somewhat differently situated, and their law enforcement agencies and who is the most active. So it is an or. You don't need to file with all of them.
So to further clarify, this is Carrie Ballinger, Rockcastle County Schools. If we make a report to an SRO within our school district, does that quantify and meet the expectation of the duty to report?
Okay, so good question. My first answer would be I would go ahead and make a report to an outside agency, because the statute is very clear that any internal investigation does not substitute for an investigation by CHFS local law enforcement. So if your SRO is an employee of the school district, that could be an internal investigation. It's also something that you might want to check with your board attorney about, because I know SROs are differently situated in each of your districts. But I'm always of the belief of better safe than sorry, right? I would do something that's specifically prescribed in the statute.
Thank you.
I'll give an example. Unfortunately, we've had reports that we would do with our SRO, but our SRO is technically an employee of the local sheriff. We would still do a report to the KSP, just even though he was not technically our employee, we would still do both. And that was just to make sure we covered it. As far as, when you have someone in your district that applies that, there's a case number that's typically given to, and at least in my experience, honestly, I always had the employee come to my office when they made the report so I could witness it. But at the very least, I'd have them show me the case number. If they said they reported, and then tell me, show me the case number so that I can find out for sure. So again, just for someone to say they did it's one thing. To have the case number for them, again, I always had them come to my office immediately. And no matter what was going on, we dropped what we were doing. We did it immediately in my office, because I wanted to make sure that I saw that and I was a witness to it.
Thank you. I would also note that this duty is separate than the duty that's prescribed under 161-123. So you'll be making this report to one of these agencies along with that EPSB report. And then next slide, please.
So I'm just going to provide a little bit more clarification regarding KEX access and notifications. Next slide. So sorry. So the superintendent's duty to report, again, the superintendent reports all must be submitted in KEX. We used to accept paper ones that we would receive in the mail, but it all has to go through KEX now. So the superintendents will receive confirmation of receipt of any report submitted by the district, notice of where there is sufficient evidence, whether there is sufficient evidence in the report, and notice of any action taken against the certificate holder who is the subject of the report. Next slide. So the superintendents and superintendent designees have access to the legal tab, and that's what allows for you to file a complaint, view district complaints as well. Once a complaint is filed, by the district, the superintendent receives instant notice of receipt of the complaint via KEX to the primary email address. So whatever you have at your primary email address, that's where it'll go to, no matter if it's the designee that files it or the superintendent. All superintendent, again, notices will go to the primary email address on file, and it will come from this email address. So it's a no reply. So just want to make sure that it goes to your inbox and not junk mail. After a district file complaint is reviewed and a decision is entered into KEX, the superintendent and the educator will receive notice of this outcome on the 7th day, whether it's sufficient or insufficient. If a complaint is found sufficient and a case is open, so again, that's at the initial, there's a follow-up review, and the superintendent receives instant notice of that outcome as well. It's for district filed complaints. Then the other notices received by the superintendent will be for any district file complaints. The superintendent receives, is also copied on every educator notice related to board review of a case. So if it goes for initial review, one of those outcomes that Nora reviewed, as well as other notices regarding that case would go to your email.
I have
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why I'm going to ask this question is there was some discussion with legislators. When we talk about superintendent designees for the legal tab, are there restrictions on who can have that designation? And I'll tell you why, because when you have students that transfer from one district to another, there's a lot of times, knowing the background of the student, if there was some type of restraining order, things of that nature against the student, there's a lot of discussions among legislators to have your SROs to have the access to this legal tab. So my question is, and I don't know the answer to it, of course, is who can be superintendent designees, or is there a limit to that? I mean, there's practice of who you'd have. I would definitely have somebody in central office, my DPP or something of that nature. But if an SRO doesn't work in the district, would you want the SRO to have access?
I
If
don't
that
think
makes
they
sense.
can because they wouldn't have an account, right? They wouldn't have a KEX account. And
Makes sense.
typically designees, so I usually receive from the district, from the superintendent, if they want a designee assigned. And usually I'll just follow up and I'll say, if you could provide a date of birth or something to make sure I'm picking the right individual. And also make a note of the fact that if someone leaves and they no longer need to be designee, we would need to receive that notification as well from the district.
Right. So yeah, so that's a very interesting question because KEX to set up the profile, the idea is that the individual is applying for certification or is applying for like an option 6 program through the university, and there's that simultaneous sort of application process. So with SROs being law enforcement and not really having any sort of reason to be obtaining a credential, they wouldn't have a KEX profile, which means that they would not be able to be designated in the system, because to be able to be designated as superintendent designee, you would actually have to have a profile in the system.
Is there a setting or a specific process you go through to receive those notifications? And I ask that because I don't think that I am getting notifications. The last one I received was June 12th, I think, and maybe that's the last action I was taken on specific date I'm talking about. But I think maybe something's happened since then that I've not been notified about.
And I think the thing that Cassandra was saying about the junk mail and the filters, that could be.
I received some, maybe, so I don't know. Maybe we can talk afterwards and look at that.
Absolutely, and I can look into it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think sometimes because it's coming from that email address, and sometimes there's so many, especially in large districts that have a high volume of these coming in. And when you're getting noticed, because you get that receipt when you first submit it, then you're getting the notice when it passes the first review, and then the second review, and then the final outcome. So when there's all those coming in, it potentially could be filtering them into junk or spam or something of that nature, but we can look into it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I hope we answered all of your questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Individual Learning Plan or ILP Showcase. I'd like to welcome Karen Dodd, Chief Performance Officer of the Strategic Planning and Research Team in the Office of the Commissioner, and Michelle Searcy, Comprehensive Coordinator for School Counseling in the Office of Teaching and Learning.
Good afternoon. So Michelle is not with me. I asked Leslie to come on up. She's speaking next because I'm going to give most of my time to her. I was going to talk about the ILP showcase, but I did present on that during the superintendent webcast. So hopefully all of you saw that last week, I think it was. I do still want to encourage you to share this, the ILP showcase with your staff, with your teachers, your counselors, your students, make them aware that it's out there. I also do want to mention, Dr. Fletcher talked this earlier today about the Student Advisory Council and the conversation that they had around the ILP. So many of those students had no idea what the ILP was, but as we discussed it, they were really wanting to know more about it. It was almost their project again because some of them said that they just didn't know it was called the ILP. Some are using something other than the ILP, but they had a lot of interest around it because their post-secondary readiness is so important to them. They want that tool to be able to help them prepare for what's next in their college career or career. So I really encourage all of you to make that a priority for the sake of the students because they are really hungry just to learn more about what they can do to be prepared.
And I'll add to that, we had so many students yesterday that talked about they talked about individualized learning plan without using the phrase individualized learning plan of what they have in their districts, which is fine. They still had a plan. So that was the most important part. But it was very interesting to see how different districts implement that. And one of the things that the conversation came back to the graduation requirements. If you look at the new graduation requirements, technically, students don't have to have English 11 and English 12. They could have a English requirement that's aligned with what's on their IOP for their junior and senior level English. So that was something that was really intriguing to the students as far as what does your some of your classes look like, the flexibility that's there within statute. As long as it's aligned with the IOP, there's a lot of flexibility for the graduation requirements. And that's one of the things that our students really grabbed a hold of and talked about. Now, we also talked about the limitations when it comes to staffing. We talked about the limitations when it comes to budgets. Sometimes a lot of these are great ideas, but also too, do you have that flexibility to be able to do that? We've shared some examples. For example, one district we have Scott County, for example. I'll just use that. Great Crossing and Scott County has Elkhorn Crossing. Well, that's a very large district. They have that option. But some of their senior level English classes, you have the same senior level English teacher that's teaching a biomed English class, a biomed language arts class, in that they're focused on maybe lab reports or case studies as opposed to Beowulf. Again, I'm a math teacher. I will jump all over that science and those things as far as that. But now others, they prefer that literature. They prefer that, and that's fine. So there is a lot of flexibility of what students can have, especially in their junior and senior year, as long as it aligns with their IOP. And some of you are taking advantage of that, which is great. You could also argue that the English 100 is a flexibility. If you're doing dual credit, that's a flexibility that's offered instead of having to have actually English 12. That is the English 12 credit. So again, that's something that they really latched onto. And actually there's a video here that they did about the IOP. So those flexibilities, look at them, use them as much as you can, but also too, if there's other ways you can see in other districts what they're doing, it'd be great.
It over to Leslie to go into.
Oh,
our
I
new
will say
blog.
one more thing. Superintendent Bradley, that's where our teacher apprenticeship conversation came in from Noah. He was all over that. It was really good. So congratulations.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie McKinney. I'm a researcher and strategic data analyst on Karen Dodd's team. And I am very quickly going to go over with you a new resource that we have coming from our team. If you could, next slide, please. And that's our research blog. We just launched our newest research blog on August 11th. And before I get into the nuts and bolts of what's in it, I do want to just tell you where you can find that. You can access the blog, including archived blogs that we have related to these issues on the Department of Education's website. Just do a quick search, research blog. It'll take you to a landing page where you can again look at active blogs or go back and look at archive blogs that we recently have and that they've actually had in years past. So we'll jump right into what that is pretty quickly here. Next slide, please. So just to kind of talk a little bit about what we do, our team is really charged with conducting research, studies, creating reports relative to high interest educational topics on a national and a state level. And in doing so, we also pay close attention to strategic efforts on the part of the department. So with that in mind, we do generate quite a bit of reports that you may or may not see, and some of those are quite lengthy. And some of those are generated specifically for the purpose of helping offices to, in their decision-making, to support the work that they do. However, we know that there's some important information that comes from those studies that could be of value to you. And so in order to make that more digestible, what we've created are blog articles. They should essentially take you about 5 to 10 minutes to read, and they're going to revolve around the research, data visualizations, real examples coming from the field around Kentucky on these relevant topics. Our hope is that we will do this in a timely manner, hoping to release these blogs about every 2 weeks. And we'll do that in either bit by bit in terms of one-off subjects or series, which you're going to see a little bit more of in just a minute. But we also want to make sure that these are, again, digestible for not only educators, but community members, policymakers, and families. And so we are writing those and designing those for all stakeholders. Next slide, please. I told you I would be fast. We did announce this blog debut through Kentucky Teacher Magazine, and you may have also seen it mentioned in the Commissioner's weekly message. We also wanted this to be something beyond just us disseminating information to you, and so we designed it in such a way that we could get two-way feedback, if you will. We intentionally incorporated a reflection question at the end of each of these blogs where we invite folks to give us insights from the field, where we can learn from you and see the kinds of discussions that it sort of prompts throughout the state. Next slide, please. We started this particular debut with a topic that's very relevant right now, given especially what Dr. Stafford and Ms. Savage just shared. The issue of chronic absenteeism is one that impacts the nation, not only Kentucky, and so it's not only timely, but it's a very important issue. I had the privilege of writing not only the first post, but the first series around chronic absenteeism, titled right there for you. This one has already launched. I believe our next one goes out next week. And really the first one sets the stage for us to look at what chronic absenteeism looked like pre-pandemic, where we saw concerns mostly with selected schools and districts across the state, to now a topic that is widespread, that hits just about every community and every school across Kentucky. So we're excited to launch this series. Hopefully we'll learn together. You'll also we'll have a common understanding of sort of the landscape of chronic absenteeism across Kentucky over the last 5 or 6 years. I do want to give you a little bit of insight into our next theme, or if you will, and that's on teacher well-being. That's probably going to last more than the 5 posts that you'll see with chronic absenteeism, probably more like 10 or 11. And it's really designed to look at teacher well-being from a human standpoint, but also from a retention standpoint, looking at contextual factors that research suggests are things that promote positive teacher well-being and how we can hang on to those great teachers once we get them in the classroom. So we're really excited to launch these. That teacher well-being piece will take us on into the early part of the year. We hope that you will bring ideas to us. We have a few sort of lingering about what we may look at next. It could be some one-off topics of interest, but it could also be something that you bring to us that you would like us to do some more work with, things that are impacting you on the ground level. So I appreciate your time. I hope that wasn't too fast, but we hope that you'll jump on there. You'll read this first blog, leave us a comment, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for the information. We have come to the end of our agenda, but before we do adjourn, do you have something you'd like to
I
say?
have one other item. I'm happy to say that we've finished our contract dealing with the new one application system throughout the state. We are on schedule to launch that in February, so that there could be one application for teaching across the Commonwealth. And also it'll be where there's teaching vacancies, we'll be able to get that information. So it's going to be more modernized than our current job vacancy postings. But also too, for example, if someone in Powell County is applying to be a math teacher and you've got all your math positions filled, Superintendent Watson, then Ms. Jones can look at it Superintendent Jones can look at it in East Bernstein and say, hey, wait a minute, what do you think about coming here to live? She can steal them before you get them too. And she might do that. She might do that. Yeah. No, yes, yes. But I will say this, an applicant can say, I only want it to go to Powell County. Now, you can also add to it, like, okay, this is the general for the entire state, but if I wanted some other pieces of information, you can request that after you see the application. But also the teacher or the potential teacher could put, I only want to be in 14th, 15th region, or I won't say it, probably something other than sports regions, but in the NKCES or in KEDC, something that we can divide it all up into, or they could just say certain counties or certain districts. It could be independent districts, it could be county districts, or they could just say, we want to release this statewide. So that if you're struggling to find an applicant, whether it be a science teacher, which many of us do, you can see the statewide. But now again, if a teacher says we want it released onto a certain region, they would only do it to a certain region. So that's some of the parameters that we're having. We are working with the company and we have a contract ready to go, and hopefully we are planning on that being launched in February for the close of the school year and beginning of the next year. So we're very excited about that.
Thank you.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. You can, as far as, you can still use, like, for example, we had a system that we used. We would ask everybody to use that common system, but if you had additions you wanted to add on, you could probably still add your others. I'll have to go back to Dr. Brewer to see, as far as you may want to start looking at breaking contracts. So this should save you money in the long run. So again, I will defer that question specifically to Dr. Brewer, but as far as breaking contracts, I think that'd still be up to you.
You said that would be February.
Yes.
So maybe we could put that on our November
Yeah, that's a
agenda
good
to
idea.
have
Yep.
more information about that.
Good call.
Yeah. What was it? Sorry, what was it called exactly?
It's the new job vacancy posting, the statewide vacancy portal, and have Dr. Brewer.
Okay. Got it.
And we should have more about that contract being completed by November.
Okay.
Thank you. Also, I will note before we adjourn that our next meeting date is November 10th. That is a different date than was originally sent out. There was some conflict with the original date. That's the same time as the commissioner can't be two places at one time. So again, November 10th will be our next.
No, I wanted to see if we could switch it to the 4th. It was originally the 11th, and then we switched to the 10th, and now we need the 4th.
Okay, so let's start that over. November 4th is the proposal for the next meeting. And again, you have the option to join that virtually or in person, whichever works best with your schedule. My apologies.
It's very confusing.
Okay, with that, I do need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Safe travels home.